Okay, so here's the final video for my capstone project throughout the whole year. First of all, let's see what is my topic. My topic is find the best shape of cars in order to reduce the wind drag so that I could do some contribution to cars which would save more energy. So here's the reason why I choose this topic. From a research, it says wind drag contributes to the 80% of the friction of the car, which means that 80% of the car's energy are used to overcome this kind of wind drag, this kind of friction. And by reducing the wind drag, it would help the cars to save a lot of more energy. So, since the car is the main contributor to the air pollution, if we can cut down the energy the car uses, so we can cut down the pollutants the car produced, so we can make them much more environmental friendly instead of finding those new resources or develop new hybrid cars, which is quite complicated and it will take a lot more time. So first, let's define the wind drag. The most common unit to define wind drag is the drag coefficient. So the drag coefficient is used to quantify the drag of an object in a fluid environment, such as water or air. So for example, the total friction exerted on the cars, it could be defined as a drag coefficient. So here's some drag coefficients for the common object. So from the top we can see the sphere has a drag coefficient of 0.47. At the bottom, the streamlined body have a drag coefficient of 0.04 and streamlined half body have a drag coefficient at 0.09. So at first I think it will be quite easy for me to do this project because I just need to design a streamlined body so that the drag coefficient will be the smallest and get the project done. But later I proved myself I was wrong. So when the drag coefficient comes to the cars, it will become totally different. That's why later I found myself I was wrong. So first, here's some common drag coefficients for cars. For the Toyota Prius, it has 0.24. For Mercedes C classes, it has 0.27. For Ferrari 458, it has a drag coefficient of 0.33. So after reading this kind of data, I was wondering why the car has such a big drag coefficient. Because as long as they have a streamlined body, they will have as low as the drag coefficient as possible. So then I took my first step to the project. I read an essay published by the University of South California. It is called Drag Reduction. So in this essay, it briefly introduced how the car shape evolves throughout the history and the reason why the shape of cars cannot become super streamlined, so it will reach the limits of the drag coefficient at 0.09. And here is a small clip for more information about the drag coefficient on cars. So here is a small video clip for the wind drag on cars.
Now, when we look at some basic car models, we can see here for something like an SUV that along these top surfaces, because they are not perpendicular to the flow, because they're parallel to the flow, only viscous drag can act on them. So all these surfaces like that, the under tray there, only viscous drag can act on that, because if you increase or decrease the pressure on it, it just provides an upwards or a downwards force. But we get pressure drag on regions like there, regions like there. And of course, there. So these are our sources of our different drag regions on a car. Now, when we test our model in a wind tunnel or we test in CFD or something like that, we get a coefficient of drag, a CD. Now, the CD value, people often read a little bit too much into it. They say like, oh, this car's got a CD of 0.3 and this one's got a CD of 0.4, so therefore the 0.3 is more efficient. Not really true. The CD is back calculated from an equation for drag. Let me show you. So these are the basic equations we get. The top one is for calculating the drag force. If we know our air density, our velocity, our area, and our coefficient of drag. And the bottom one is what we use to calculate the CD for a given car. So basically, let's say we test our car in the wind tunnel. We test it, say, 20 meters a second. We put that in as the velocity. We get a drag value of, say, 100 newtons. We put that in as our drag. We get an air density of 1.2 kilograms per meters cubed. And then we put in our area, which we decide as the frontal area or any reference area you want on the front of the car. And then we calculate all that, and that gives us our CD. Now, the thing that you may have just noticed there is I was a bit confusing about the definition of area. And that's because we can actually define the area as whatever we want. If you look at a conventional plane wing or basically the standards for how aircraft wings are measured, they actually use the area from the top down, the planform area. Cars, though, always use the frontal area. Something like a Formula One car, even though their frontal area may change with little aero modifications, they'll keep it at a constant 1.47 meters squared. So what we really see is we don't want the A here, but we rather want CDA. And that's a much better measure of a car's aerodynamic performance. So when you're comparing cars, don't compare CD for efficiency, compare CDA, because a small aread car like this is going to naturally have a higher CD than a large aread car for the same level of drag, which means that you aren't getting the full picture if you're just looking at the CDs.
Throughout the whole year, I've took the online courses of the aerodynamics because when I design the car shape, I need to know some knowledge about aerodynamics so that I will make the car shape has less wind drag. Also, after that, I've had 2 designs of the cars, but when I put them into the simulator and calculate the drag coefficient, it doesn't seem like there's any reduction of it. Instead, I make the car shape have more wind drag, so I failed those designs. Afterwards, I retook those courses and read more essays about the car designing, the shape designing, and I modified the software I used. So then I had my 3rd design, but I wish to make a model, but I failed because there's not enough time for me to use 3D printer to print it out. Yeah, so that's the firstly how what I've done throughout this year, and here's the video about the simulator I've used for the car shape. Because when the simulator runs, I cannot record them because there are so many calculations in my computer. If I record them, it will just crash. So, yeah, so here's the video from others' computer.
Point, where the air is compressed and the velocity is brought to 0. It's like we are constantly grabbing air and pushing it with us. Similarly, the wake in the back is a low-pressure separation bubble where we are grabbing a bunch of air and pulling it with us. We are giving it some of our energy and then letting it go, and then grabbing some more. I noticed that the raindrops on my car's rear windshield wouldn't get blown off when I would go down the freeway.
So during the whole project, I've met several obstacles. First of all, I'm not really professional at the designing software, so I need to take extra time for learning it and mastering it. And secondly, I barely know anything about aerodynamics of the car, so as I said before, I need to take a lot of online courses to learn them. And during the project, I have other important things to do, such as college application, so the time management is really hard. It's a really hard thing for me to do that, so I need to balance all those times so that I will not either drop my grades or drop my college application and I will not, and I can still focusing on doing this project. But clearly, it is this project. I failed this project because I could not have a real material. So clearly, I failed this project because I cannot make a solid model for the demo or for the exhibition. So after I finish the project, I have some reflection to do. First of all, I overestimate my abilities of learning new knowledge, because at first I thought I just need to take about 10 hours to learn the aerodynamics knowledge and the software so that I would make several designs later. But however, when I'm doing this project, I find out I'm overestimate my abilities, because it takes like maybe 20 or 25 hours to learn those stuff, and it is quite tough for me during that time. And secondly, I do not have a really good time management skills, because I could not follow the schedules I've made during the proposal phase when I'm proposing this project, and during the researching phase I did not really use the time very efficiently, so that sometimes I've wasted a lot of time on just reading the same essays again and again, so that it seems like I'm learning something from it, but actually I was totally blank in my memories, and I cannot apply those theories into my design, so that I had to take another courses, which cost a lot of time, so that at last I will not have time to actually print the 3D models and use it for exhibition and for the testing. So here's the end of my video, and I will say thank you, and thanks for Mr. Richard and Mr. Ewing for guiding and helping us to do such great project in our last year at Warsaw. Thank you so much.